welcome everyone. This is session 12 of our GLP. I have two important announcements to make. First is we are celebrating the anniversary of our starting these sessions. We started that in October, thanks to Ram, and we are able to have it, and we are glad to say that the enrollment and participation has slowly increased. We would love for that to increase even more, and so with your help we will do it to spread the word and wisdom of Dr. Ram's book, which is Good Living Practices, which is what we talk about. Second announcement that I have to make is want to share the happiness about Ram's birthday yesterday. He shares the birthday along with Gandhiji, and so happy birthday and blessings to Ram. Please join me in blessing him and wishing him many, many, many happy returns of the day.
That was not part of the GLP, Radhika.
the laughter and the joy that you spread is part of the GLP. So without much further ado, we are sharing the good living practices, and today's good living practice session is about the many benefits of chewing. I know that we have touched on this topic, but Ram will be going into more detail about this. And it's, as you know, the good living practice is an interactive session. And so each session we are focusing on optimal health and wellness and balanced emotions and calm mind and stable body, and how it helps us to keep healthy. And in today's GLP session, we'll be focusing on how proper chewing boosts the physical, mental, and emotional immunity. And we will cover the following aspects: importance of chewing food, benefits of chewing food, how chewing affects body, mind, and emotions. So this is very, very important. And, it is something that I remember as a child when I used to come back home from school, and I was extremely hungry. And whatever snack my mother or my grandmother used to give me, it would be over in like 30 seconds. And my mother would say, oh, sit down, enjoy the food, sit down and, chew it. Don't wolf it down. So, and, at that time, I did not realize how important that was. And, after, as I grew older, I used to say the same thing with my children also. And now I'm telling that to my grandkids. You sit down, enjoy your food, enjoy the taste and everything. So without much further ado, Ram, stage is yours. Please let us know and share your wisdom about the benefits of chewing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Radhika, for that wonderful introduction. And good morning to everybody on the Pacific time zone, and good afternoon to all the others in the other time zones. All right. So good living practices, as Radhika mentioned, are practices that keep our body, our mind, and emotions functioning as one unit. This is extremely important because this is what builds optimal health and wellness. This is what builds immunity. So let me recapitulate what we discussed. That's all these past sessions, and then I'll focus on today's topic. So let me start here by sharing the slides. So I hope you can see the slides here.
Yes.
All right. So as I said, in the past 9 sessions, we covered several aspects of good living practices. I spoke about the importance of mindfulness while we cook our food. I spoke about the importance of mindfulness when we are actually eating our food. This is very, very important in order to achieve optimal health. Later, we also saw the benefits of physical exercise. And I also talked about brain strengthening or brain training exercises, because both physical exercise and brain training exercise are just not important for the body and the mind, but it's important for the emotions as well. And these keep the body, mind, and emotions in sync 24/7. And then we talked about the importance of selfless service or Kama Yoga in order to bring harmony to the body, mind, and emotions. We also discussed about the importance of bringing in harmonious impressions through the 5 portals or 5 gateways, sense of sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell, because this is what the impression that we bring in is what brings immunity or what brings optimal health and wellness to our own selves. And then we discussed the importance of fasting, and I mentioned about how fasting, intermittent fasting, or what I call as 12-hour to 13 hours of fasting, how that brings harmony to the body, mind, and emotions. And then in the 10th session, we actually explored the consequences of having an elevated blood sugar. And one of our participants in the group, Chandarji, provided us fantastic details about his own journey and how he managed with his blood sugar levels. And then last month, we discussed about the importance of sleep and how optimal sleep is very important or paramount to boosting the physical, mental, and emotional immunity. All right. So today, actually, we discussed, as Radhika mentioned, we did discuss a little bit about chewing in the first session when I discussed about the importance of eating, but I just barely covered it. And then there was a question that came up during the last session. And so I thought I'll cover that aspect today in greater detail. In Ayurveda, it's very interesting because Ayurveda says that in order to have optimal digestion, optimal health and wellness, you have to have proper digestion, because digestion begins at the mouth. That's what Ayurveda says. It begins at the mouth. And what Ayurveda says is the road to optimal health and wellness starts with the mouth. And so when they talked about the mouth, the texts were actually referring to proper chewing of the food. Okay. Modern medicine now understands why proper chewing is paramount to good health and wellness. We have amazing number of research studies that show that the road to immunity begins with proper chewing. And that's the reason why I consider chewing as one of the most important aspects of good eating practices. So the question is, can you reflect on your own food habits, especially the time when you put the food into your mouth? Do you gulp your food? Do you partially chew it? Or while chewing it, are you talking to other people? And is the food that you are eating, is it of a soupy consistency before you swallow it? The reason being that several studies now show the importance of chewing and its close association with physical immunity, mental immunity, as well as cognition. Chewing, the term chewing, actually in scientific circles is referred to as mastication. And mastication involves the up and down and lateral movements, or side to side, left to right, right to left, movement of the jaw muscles. Okay, so just imagine when you are chewing your food, you may be thinking that only the jaw muscles are active, but these jaw muscles are actually connecting to the brain. All right, and these jaw muscles, they assist in reducing the particles of solid food into a soupy consistency. So when the food enters the mouth, the jaw muscles, they position the food between the teeth, okay, for grinding and crushing. The minute the food is kept between the teeth, what happens is multiple neural circuits immediately get activated from the jaw muscles to the brain tissue. Okay, and this brain tissue, now there are areas in the brain that are involved in recognizing the presence of the food in the jaw muscles. All right, and those neural circuits then send information to the mouth with regard to force, strength, and how much enzyme activity is needed to transform the food. Okay, so the force, how much force you're applying to the food, how much strength you're applying, okay, how long is the duration of chewing, and how much of saliva or enzyme activity is released. All this come about only when the brain sends the information to the mouth. All right, and this information exchange happens the minute you put the food between the teeth. And then what happens is that food now gets converted into what we call a bolus. A bolus is nothing but a combination of the saliva and the food particles, okay, which becomes easy to swallow. Okay, now this chewing action, the force, the strength, and the tone, all this releases the salivary contents. The saliva actually contains a lot of important enzymes. So when you chew your food, what happens is the food becomes softer and softer. And what happens is, it's interesting, the more you chew, the more saliva do you generate in the mouth. Okay, and then it is this combination of saliva and the food that enters the esophagus and the stomach for the next step of digestion. So now what happens is, now when you swallow your food that is properly masticated or properly chewed, you are just not bringing the food, but you're bringing, along with the food, you're bringing the saliva. So when the saliva reaches a certain threshold in the stomach sends signals to the brain saying that I'm full now, I don't need any more food. So what happens is, essentially, when you properly chew your food, okay, with just a few morsels of food, you feel full. Okay, and the good thing is, because you have properly chewed and grinded and pulverized the food, what happens is the food now becomes very easy for the gastric action, for the gastric juices to act upon. Okay, so the more you chew, it's interesting, the more you chew, the less you end up eating. At the same time, you're burning more calories during that process. So proper chewing of the food does two things. It allows you to eat less because you're already full with the amount of saliva that has come up. Okay, so you eat less, and the more you chew, the more calories or energy you're burning. So that's the reason why Ayurveda texts, okay, and modern medicine now with evidence-based studies now show you that chewing is one of the most natural and one of the most safest methods to bring down the hunger response, to dampen the hunger response. Okay, and that's one of the secrets behind losing excess fat. So for those people who are totally involved in this paradigm about losing fat, okay, they cut on calories, they cut on the food, they cut on all kinds of essential nutrients and all that. But all that will not play a role if you don't properly chew your food. Instead, if you have a proper nourishing meal and you chew your food properly, then you don't need to cut down on your food at all. That chewing action will help in reducing excess fat. So it's very, very important that to take this into consideration. Now, it's just not about losing fat. Chewing food also promotes good sleep. So for all those people who have hard time going to sleep, look back at your chewing action and notice whether you're just swallowing the food, whether you're talking while chewing. Because what happens is, when you're talking, you're not going to chew your food. So it's good. So the particles that are entering the stomach are not the properly chewed particles. They are actually solid food. Okay, and for all those people who wake up in the morning and who feel that their minds are fogged up, okay, look back at how you ate your food, how you chewed your food, because chewing food actually helps in promoting good sleep. Proper chewing also helps to defog the brain. And if your brain is defogged, it actually helps in not only sharpening the memory, but also overcomes all negative emotions. Now, you may wonder why. Why is it that chewing here actually helps in memory and cognition and good sleep? Why is that? Because what happens is, the chewing action, remember I told you, when you chew your food properly, you're sending the brain signals, you're sending the signals to the brain. Well, the areas in the brain that are involved in sending information to the mouth regarding the chewing action, those areas are also responsible for sleep. Those areas are also responsible for laying down memories. Okay, so that's the reason why improper chewing affects your sleep, improper chewing affects your cognition as well. And there's one more important aspect based on modern studies, and Ayurveda also talked about this. Chewing increases blood flow. Amazing. I mean, just the act of chewing increases the blood flow. And the more blood flow into the brain, the more clarity you have, the less fogging of the brain. Okay, and that's the reason why researchers are now discovering that improper chewing not only triggers alterations in the memory centers, but also leads to improper spatial and memory deficits because of lack of blood flow. Okay, so that's the reason why mastication or the act of chewing is needed for this exchange of information between the brain and the mouth. Okay, and if this information, brain-mouth information, is lacking, then it results in morphological and memory impairments, especially in older individuals. So in our setting, where we bring in people with memory deficits, people with Alzheimer's, we the first thing we tell them is start chewing your food. Now, for you to chew your food naturally, then you don't need to talk. You shouldn't be talking. Okay, that's number one. And number two, you should be in a place where you are focusing on the chewing act, right? Which means then you cannot do any other task. So now, by just chewing your food, you are incorporating two of the most important good eating practices. Number one, no distraction, which is mindfulness, and no doing other tasks, which again is mindfulness. Now, epidemiology studies actually shows that a decrease in the number of teeth in the mouth, okay, or a decreased denture use, or any problems with the mouth resulting in poor biting force, okay, all this can contribute to poor chewing and dementia. So a lot of our dementia patients actually have any of these improper functions. They have either improper teeth, they don't have proper teeth, or they're not using their dentures, or even they just put their food in the mouth and they don't chew it, they just swallow it. So that's the reason why for dementias, actually, for people with dementia, we always we emphasize the need for chewing the food. Now the question is then, how long do you have to chew? All right. Well, it depends on the type of food you choose to eat. So, for example, now if you're eating ripened fruits, or if you happen to eat cooked vegetables, they require fewer chews. You still have to chew them, but it requires less number of chews. Compare that to raw veggies or raw salads or meat-based foods or nuts or any kind of beans. These require a longer chew. Okay. So, is there an average determination? Well, Ayurveda talked about that, and now modern research studies also show that an average count is a minimum of 30 chews. Okay, so each time you take a morsel of food, you have to count for a 30 before you swallow the food. Be it whatever be the kind of food, whether it is properly cooked food or whether it is meat-based or heavily raw-based foods. If you count for a count of 30, okay, that is probably sufficient enough to generate not only the saliva, but also generates enough amount of biting force so that you can, so that the food is now broken into smaller pieces. Okay, and then, so once you count for a 30, then what happens is you reach a stage where the food is actually in a soupy-like texture. That's the time when you start swallowing the food. Okay, so that's the reason why chewing now, not only do you have to be mindful, but it is also a brain training exercise. So remember, I talked about how you need to keep your body, mind, and emotions in check, or they have to act as one unit. Well, just consider the act of chewing. Okay, so when you're chewing and you're counting for a 30, naturally you have to count. Because you have to count, your focus is on the count. Okay, so you're counting mentally 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on for a count of 30, which means you cannot be distracted, number one, which means you cannot do any other tasks because you have to concentrate on the chewing, right, on the counts. Okay, so which means your mind, your attention is all on the chews. Not only that, because your focus and attention is on the chews, you cannot invite any other emotions. So your emotions are also balanced. Okay, so now to get to a count of 30, you're counting mentally without any distraction. So your focus, your attention, and your awareness is all on the chewing act. So, and what do we mean by focus, attention, awareness? So if your focus, if your attention, if your awareness is on that action, that in itself is meditation, my friends. All right. So that's the reason why chewing becomes extremely important. So you have to have undivided attention, you have to have undivided focus, and you have to have an awareness on the very act of chewing. Okay, so that's the reason why chewing now, like cooking and like eating, becomes a meditative act. All right. So the next time you put the food into your mouth, remember, you have to chew the food, not once, not twice, but for a minimum of 25 to 30 counts. Okay. The reason being that this is where the minute you put the food into your mouth, this is where you start the entire practice of building immunity at the level of body, at the level of mind, and at the level of emotions. All right. So to me, this is very important. This entire practice of chewing is extremely important. To me, I always consider that proper health and proper nourishment, proper immunity comes from these small little acts, it's very important because until now, we never recognized the importance. Even though Ayurvedic text talked about it, okay, only now functional medicine is now recognizing the importance of chewing. And so now if you go to a typical functional medicine doctor or maybe your nutritionist, don't be surprised if they say that, eat your food. When you're eating your food, make sure that you chew the food. And by the way, again, this is not from, I'm not taking it from a hat. There are evidence-based studies to support the importance of chewing and how it not only helps in regulation of your physical body, but also helps to regulate your brain, your mind, as well as your emotions. And, I have in my book, Good Living Practices that Radhika just showed, I have given additional tips about other practices that you can incorporate along with the act of chewing. All right. So this is very important, my friends. So let me stop here and I'll take your questions, or we can go for a round of discussions.
So, Ram, I know we have covered this once. You have already covered this in your talk, but I just wanted to emphasize one question that we have. I followed your suggestion about the chewing part and noticed that I was able to chew completely within 20 counts. But I kept chewing for 30 counts and ended up with a lot of saliva in the mouth. Is that good?
I didn't get the question. So she
chewed. Yeah, she's chewed about 20 times, like this thing, but since you say that it is supposed to be 30 counts, she went on chewing and ended up with a lot of saliva in her mouth.
Yeah.
And she just wants to know if that is good.
Oh, it's very good. It's extremely good, because the reason being that the more saliva that you produce, what's going to happen is you're going to produce more enzymes. Okay, we have salivary enzymes, and please remember, digestion, even though we talk about digestion, the minute we talk about digestion, we visualize the stomach, but digestion begins at the mouth first. There is a reason why there is a saliva being produced when you're eating your food. And within the saliva, there are salivary enzymes, okay, that break down the food. And the more saliva is produced, the better for you, because what happens is now that amount of saliva along with the food enters the stomach. And as I said earlier, what happens is within 2 or 3 morsels, and this, I'm a living example. I've noticed that by the time I eat 4 or 5 morsels of food, I'm full. I don't need to eat a big plate of food. And that in itself, because I'm properly chewing, that in itself, there is 100% absorption, which means that 4 or 5 morsels of food is enough for me to sustain for the next 6 to 7 hours before I take up the next meal. So yes, saliva is extremely important. And by the way, for all those people who have issues with weight, this is the most important part. Look back at your chewing and see if you can generate enough saliva. That way you can reduce the amount of food that you want to eat. So extremely important.
So you have also said that, it depends upon the kind of food that we're eating. Like, for example, if it is fruit or something, or, then it requires less amount of chewing.
Correct. So if it is juice, there is no question of chewing the juice, because the juice is already pulverized and it's already. But it's very interesting, Radhika, and I'm glad if you raise a question or somebody else raises this question. So a lot of people, they say, okay, if you don't need to chew, then why not we have a food that is only liquidy? But that's it's not helpful. The reason being, please remember, there is a reason why the mouth is connected to the brain. Okay, the brain is looking for signals to come from the mouth, and if the signals don't come on a regular fashion, what happens is the brain cells that are involved in chewing, they become what we call atrophied. Atrophied is nothing but degeneration. And over time, when those cells get degenerated, that can lead to memory loss. So you cannot solely depend on liquid food or soupy food and say, okay, I'm done, I don't need to chew. You have to chew. The more you chew, the more you're training those brain cells, the more strengthening those neurons that connect to the mouth as well as to memory centers. So that's the reason, because what happens is, and this is very interesting, because in our dementia care center, we have noticed there are a lot of people who use either dentures or who do not have proper teeth. Over time, because they're being fed soupy diet or they're being fed liquid diet, what happens is their dementia becomes worse. So that's the reason why we insist that they have to chew their food. So which means to chew the food, which means then you have to have proper teeth or you have to have dentures. So that's the reason why you cannot just rely on juicy food or soupy food. You have to have solid food that you can continuously use to break it. So and dentist will, the next time you go to a dentist, ask your dentist. The dentist will tell you that the more you break, the more you crush, the more you pound your teeth, the much better it is for your brain.
Yes.
So very, very important.
Yes. And Ramu has one question in the chat, and it says, if your food, and I think you have already answered that question, but if the food that we have to have is like soup, or is it is juicy, how many times do we need to chew? And
Yeah,
I think you have answered it.
Yeah, if it is juicy or soupy, then we don't need to chew. There's not much of a chewing action there. Right. But try not to depend only on juicy or soupy things. Try to have some solid food along with these soups.
Right. And I think Bindu has a question. She's raised her hand. Bindu, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Radhika ji. Yes. So eating is considered to be a social event, right? You share your food around the table, you eat some, you talk some. So is that not a good idea? Because I mean, so should you not talk while you're eating? Because, families have dinners together at the end of the day, right? And you share what happened during the day, or you break bread with your work colleagues where you're, catching up on work, or, and eating as well. So is that, does that interfere with proper chewing? And how do you, how do you do that? How do you, also socialize as well as chew properly and be mindful of that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bindu. And I think I did address this in the first couple of sessions. So what happens is, Bindu, on one hand, yes, we do want to have a social gathering. We want to have that social commitments. The more you are socially involved, the greater is, especially for cognition. We tell a lot of our dementia patients to always not be isolated, but to be in a social environment. But that is only, the social environment comes about for a few hours. But when the time comes for eating, yes, Bindu, it's always good to be in a group setting and be there, but right at the time of eating. So my suggestion is, what I do is typically what we tell our dementia patients, and that's true because even in functional medicine, they'll tell you that until the time that you're eating, please do all kinds of talk and chatter and all that. Okay, post eating, engage in all that. But during the time of eating, at least for that half an hour or so, the best practice would be to not talk, because what happens is when you talk, you are not digesting your food. You're not chewing your food. That's number one. Number two, when you talk, okay, you're not paying attention to what you're eating, all right, which means it is not a meditative act. Number three, when you talk, there is always a chance that your food may enter the respiratory tract instead of going into the stomach. So there are several other reasons why talking or laughing or singing while eating is not considered to be a good eating practice. So that's the reason why we don't want to engage in conversations for that matter. On that note, again, when you engage in a talk, you're not chewing, which means that you're not paying attention to the number of chews, remember, and you have to count. And, try it today itself, try it when you're having a lunch, everybody try and see if you can count for the number of chews, 25 to 30. Remember, it is a little tough, because which means then you have to keep quiet. It's like a zombie. You're counting on your foot. But remember, at the end of the day, you will really feel a lot of benefits. Now, on that same note, it also means that you cannot indulge in any other activity. You cannot watch a TV or you cannot do anything else but just to keep chewing. And then, of course, once you finish your food, then you can start talking or you can start engaging and all that. Now, once in a while, it's okay. Okay, but on a day-to-day basis, regularly, you need to make sure that you are properly eating, you're properly chewing. And remember, eating is meditation. You don't have to do any other act of meditation. Eating itself is meditation. And the only way you can do meditation while you're eating is focus, attention, awareness on the food itself.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ram. So in other words, not to multitask with either reading a book or watching something or even talking, right? So do one thing, which is eating.
Yeah. The reason is, what happens is, now you may say what's wrong with reading a book? Not a problem. But imagine if it's a fiction book that involves a lot of dramas and emotions. Then what happens is you are building those emotions in your mind as well. You become angry, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's worry, there's depression, all kinds of things that come about when just by reading. And for that matter, even while engaging in a discussion, That's one of the reasons why in our clinic, we always tell our patients not to engage in any kind of political discussions, because political discussions or any kind of books or any kind of talking about dramas or TV serials and all this can build emotions in your brain, and you don't want those emotions while you're eating.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rao.
Sure.
And the thing is, if you think about it, only in the 60s, after television came and everything, we started doing all these TV dinners and everything and watching. Before that,
Yes.
When I think about my grandmother or my my atte and all of them, they lived up to their 80s, 90s. But what they used to do was, my grandmother would have her, she was used to eat early. She will have her plate, serve herself the food, and she will sit there for that 20 minutes and, concentrate on eating the food. And I have watched that. I know, but, sometimes looking at whatever Ram is suggesting, I will be the first to admit, it has also entered my mind. What is he talking about? It's not practical. It's I want to catch up on my TV show, or I want to catch up on my
Emails.
all kinds of things, or news or something, anything. And I don't have the time. This is the only time I get to myself. But no, and the main thing, I do realize how important it is, because it is that is when and I've spent, and when I do that, I have spent so much time preparing this food for my family. And when my family is interested more in watching the TV, I get offended by it. And so it doesn't, and then I feel, okay, I can just make put some bread and this thing in front of them, they will eat. I don't need to make all these kind of things. So it's important for you to enjoy that food. It is important for you to concentrate. And I did realize about it once I learned about it in Good Living Practices, brought back those memories. So
Nice.
yeah.
And true, even in India, when they serve sadhya, which is a multi-course meal with a lot of things, they just focus on the food, and it's not for conversation, it's for eating the sadhya, and then the next line of guests sit, they eat and they leave. And so strangers sit next to each other, so they are not conversing, they're there just to eat, enjoy the food, and that's
Correct.
it. I think traditionally in India, that's how it's been. We are kind of silent when we are eating.
Right.
But in Western countries, we do, you're expected to have a conversation as you break bread. Deals are made over food. But in India, it's you're right, it's more of a meditative process to eat the food. Yeah.
Vijaya has 3 questions. How many times to chew non-veg? Is boiled egg considered more like vegetable with 30 chews or more? When should one drink water, before meals or after meals, or after what duration before or after food is eaten?
Yeah.
And I'll read the 4th question afterwards, because these seem related.
Okay. So how many times to chew non-veg? As I said, non-veg is a little of a different category altogether, because it's meat, it's muscle basically. So it requires longer chews. So on an average, they say, and Ayurveda actually never talked about how many chews. They just said make sure that it should be consistency. But functional medicine actually talks about 30 as an average count. But when I discuss with a lot of my patients who come for Ayurvedic consultancy, when I told them about how much chews it requires for them when they eat meat, they said 30 is not sufficient. So maybe you have to count. Okay, so 30 may not be a right number, especially if you're eating a hard-based non-vegetarian food. So maybe it's 40 counts, maybe it's 50 counts. But make sure, okay, 30 is just an average. If you are able to chew everything by 30 counts without swallowing it, well and good. If it requires more chews, then please maybe add 5 more chews, or maybe add 10 more chews. So it's difficult for me because I don't take meat, so I'm not sure. But based on my patient's observation, I'm just telling you out there, it could be 30. It's definitely not less than 30. That for sure I can tell you for guarantee. It's not less than 30. It's either 30 or a little more than 30. Okay. Now when it comes to boiled egg, yeah. And boiled egg was also discussed when we had talked to my patients. Boiled egg does not take a long time to chew. So I think the average, they said somewhere between 5 and 10 chews is what they said for boiled egg. The question is, okay, even if you chew, make sure that you have enough saliva. So, the more you chew, the more saliva you generate. So even if it's of a soupy consistency, try to chew a little bit more so that you generate more saliva. Okay. So yes, boiled egg doesn't require so much of chews. Now, when should one drink water? So usually, so what happens is, now there is a debate about water as to what exactly, I mean, there's no right evidence-based studies to support that, because functional medicine doesn't talk about water, but this is based out of Ayurvedic studies. So what Ayurveda studies says is that you don't want, so water does fill your stomach, okay? So after all, it's fluid. So you don't want to, especially when you're eating your food, you don't want to fill your stomach with water alone, okay? So the best thing is, that's the reason why traditionally we never drank water in the middle of a meal. We never drank that, okay? So my suggestion is, and Ayurveda also says one more thing. Ayurveda says to stimulate your appetite, to stimulate your digestion, and if you have acidic conditions, okay, if you have acidity and all that, the best thing is, start off your meal 15 minutes prior to your meal, have a glass of warm water with one of these cool spices like either fennel or coriander or cumin powder. Okay, so fennel, coriander or cumin powder, or a mix of these three powders. Take it into a glass of warm water, drink it, and then wait for 15 minutes. What happens? Because these are cooling spices, fennel, coriander, cumin are cooling spices. What they do is they cool down the stomach. So for people who have acidic issues, it brings down the acidity, and at the same time, it builds up the jatar agni, or the fire of digestion, and so you now feel hungry. Okay, so you've taken a water, but it is 15 minutes prior to your meal. During your meal, best is to avoid water. Okay, now post meal, how long do you have to wait? There's always a debate. Nobody has any proper research based studies to show that, but I would suggest wait for about 15-20 minutes minimum, okay, before you have, let the entire let the entire food with the saliva get properly digested in the stomach. So wait for about 20-25 minutes, or maybe half an hour if you can wait, before you have a glass of water. Okay, so again, this is all based out of Ayurvedic texts. All right. So I hope that was satisfying. There was another fourth question you said, Radhika.
Yes, fourth question is how long can you refrigerate the food for people who are not able to cook on a daily basis? What would you suggest?
Yeah. So if you were to put this question to your grandmother or to your great grandmother, they would have said, "Oh, we never had a refrigerator, so we can't even answer those questions." Okay, which is true. Those olden days, we never had refrigerators, so there's no question of refrigerating food. Whatever was prepared for the lunch was eaten during the lunch. Whatever was prepared for dinner was prepared, got eaten up during the dinner. And that, my friends, is a very good eating practice, because that's what both functional medicine and Ayurveda says, that you have to eat for that meal and then prepare fresh meal for that day. Now, I totally understand with everybody here, because we are all working. We are working, spouses are working, okay, so it's very difficult to cook fresh meal. At the same time, we do a level best to ensure that we are eating as closer to fresh meal as possible. Okay, so if you are, now there's no research based studies, but Ayurveda did realize that one of these days somebody is going to buy a refrigerator. I think they didn't talk about a refrigerator, but Ayurveda always said that if this is not possible, so there's always ifs and buts. So, and Ayurveda text, Charaka was extremely intelligent. He knew that there would have been obstacles. So what Charaka said in his text is that if by any chance you are not able to do this, then what they said is prepare in the morning and try to finish off for that day. So which means that even if you are refrigerating it, try to finish off with that night and then try to prepare a meal the next day. Okay. So, I mean, again, it's one little aspect, okay, but if you combine that with proper chewing, proper attention, and warming up your food and not taking it raw or not taking it cold, then you are circumventing, or you're overcoming that little thing about refrigeration and all that. The problem comes only if you refrigerated, heat the food, and then do all kinds of other practices like not paying attention to eating, not paying attention to where you are, noisy environment. Then what happens is all this is a cumulative effect. That's when your digestion can go wacky. Okay, so one aspect, if it is not followed, it's okay. it's okay. You can, but make sure that you bring in other practices of eating so that you are still able to achieve the proper digestion.
Right. I think Vijaya has one more question. Are sandwiches healthy?
Well, I mean, everything is healthy as long as you follow good eating practices. Okay. So yeah, I mean, sandwiches, it all depends on what is in the sandwich. I mean, if you have veggies and if it is warm enough, and if you have sprayed a little bit of ghee on your sandwich, and then if you have proper veggies in it, or whatever, meat based or whatever it is, and if you're eating properly at the right time, 12 o'clock in the noon, at the right place, without any distraction, not in front of your TV, not in the presence of your, because sandwiches, the minute I think about sandwiches, I'm looking back to my days at the institute where I was working at the Mayo Clinic or the Buck Institute, where we used to have what we call the brown bag lunches meeting. Okay, the brown bag, it was nothing but a brown paper bag which had a sandwich and an apple. Okay, and people were eating it during the meeting, during the discussion, during the conference, during the symposia. All right, so you're biting on it and everybody gets distracted. You're not chewing on it. You're paying attention to somebody's talk. So everything was improper. Okay, all good eating practices were thrown out the door. So sandwiches are good. It's like rotis. Everything is good, my friends. I wouldn't say, Ayurveda never said no to anything. Okay, it said yes to everything as long as you're properly chewing, as long as it is at the right time of the day, as long as it is properly done, meditation, act of chewing, proper attention to the food, proper focus. Then even, and Ayurveda went one step further. You know what they said? They said, Charaka says very clearly, he says, even poison cannot affect you if you do all the right things. So, forget about poison, but which means that sandwiches are definitely good.
And depends upon, like if you are staying away from more processed foods or anything like that, and the choosing the type of bread,
yes,
that
absolutely.
is the healthier option.
And
yeah, definitely, it is good, because just like they say about all these gluten-free recipes, you can do what works for you.
best for you.
And yeah, because that is the most important thing, where it is a balanced diet, and where it is something that works for you. Just because somebody else, it works for somebody else, a gluten-free bread or like a keto diet or something like that works for them. But if it doesn't work for you and you're not enjoying it, then it is not serving that purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Radhika, you make a very good point, because what happens is, I know of a lot of people actually who have gone back and because either their consultants, who are the practitioners, whoever it be, whether a naturopath or an osteopath or an Ayurvedic or a homeopath or even a functional medicine or a regular intern doctor, MD, who told them to eat certain nutritious food. Okay, and if they didn't like that, what happens is, now if you don't like it, which means then you are creating emotions in your brain, and that's what we mean by bringing in emotions, mind and the body into the act of food. Okay, if you're emotional out of place, and if you think about, oh, I don't like this is not good to me, this is BS, and all those, behind those words are nothing but a lot of emotions. Okay, and the minute you raise those emotions, your food is not going to be properly digested at all. You are bringing negative emotions. And by the way, negative emotions affecting your digestion is not something that Ayurveda said. I mean, Ayurveda said that, but it's not just Ayurveda alone. We now know from functional medicine and evidence-based studies that emotions have a great impact on what you eat. And I'm going to talk about more about emotions in the next 2 months. Okay, in November and December, we're going to talk only about emotions and how it affects our character. But yes, emotions affect a lot of your digestive process. Okay, so make sure that you're emotion free when you're eating.
Yeah. And Vijaya has one more question of whether we can share some sort of recipes or websites where they have healthy recipes for breakfast. And I think we'll share it in the group itself, if that is okay. And there are a few things that we can use, and we can share it at that. Is that? I hope that's okay, Vijaya.
Yeah, sure.
So
that's a good idea.
And I have one question that we received from and the email is, this question is, Ram, I have incorporated several of your GLP tips, including preparing fresh food that is organic and vegan, juggling between my job and a daily dose of physical exercise and massaging with medicated oil. Yet, I have not lost weight and I'm having trouble with sleep.
Okay.
Advise me. So that is one question that we have received.
I think I covered it again in part of the discussions. So yes, if you're doing all the right things and if you're still having issues with sleep and weight and all that, just look back. See, there's no point in and I'm glad this question came up, because a lot of people come to me and then they say, whenever I do my Ayurvedic consultation, they come and tell me, yes, we are eating fresh organic food. We are spending a lot of money on organic food. We go and buy the most expensive organic food. The question is, you may buy the best of the organic food, but the question is, how are you eating that food? When are you eating that food? Where are you eating that food? Are you properly chewing? Where is your mind? Where is your attention? And if all that is not there on the food, then no matter, you may bring the best of the foods, but that best of the foods will not help you in any way. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to sleep as well, if you're not properly eating your food, if you're not absorbing it well, if you're not digesting it well, and if you have other things that you're doing, it's definitely going to affect your sleep. And last month I discussed about sleep in a very convoluted and not actually convenient, simple, but we discuss in detail about all those aspects or all those factors that can affect sleep. So the question is, when exactly are you eating your dinner? Okay, when is the time that you plan to go to sleep? Because you may be having sleep issues probably because you're eating your food maybe very late in the night. And I told you about the good eating practices and when you should be eating your dinner. I also told about how much time gap you should leave between your dinner and sleep time. Okay, and I also told about not snacking once you finish your dinner. Okay, because snacking affects your sleep patterns as well. And then I also mentioned about what kind of good practices you should adopt 1 hour to 2 hours before you go to sleep. And I also mentioned about the sleep cycles and the clock genes in your body. I said there is a reason why at a certain time the brain sends the signal saying that I need to sleep. Okay, and if you override those signals and if you do that on a regular basis, then you're affecting the entire sleep pattern. So if you're having sleep or weight issues, my best advice is come back and start as if you're starting from scratch. So even if you don't fall asleep by 9 in the night or 10 in the night, go to sleep on a given day at 10 in the night. Okay, assuming that you had your dinner at 7, you're giving a 3-hour gap, go to sleep at 10. The first day you may not be able to sleep, but go to sleep at 10. Okay, second day, same thing, do that. Go sleep at 10, even if you don't get sleep. Third day, do that. Now what happens is you're what we call retweaking the clock gene of sleep. Okay, and now what happens 3 or 4 days later, your body will adapt to that cycle, and then you will start sleeping at 10 in the night. That's number one. Number two, weight issues. Once again, look back at how you are doing your food. Even if you are buying organic food, go back from step 1, eating, till the last step about what all you have done post eating. And all these will really help. Believe you, and I'm not saying it because I want to say it. There are people who have experienced it. They have lost weight. Now, weight loss, if you have weight issues, it's not coming from 1 day or 2 days. It's a long process before you start gaining weight. Okay, so that long process takes the same amount of time to lose fat as well. So 1 day of proper chewing or proper good eating practices will not help in losing weight. You have to wait for some time. You have to wait for maybe 15 days, maybe one month, maybe 2 months in some cases, maybe 3 months in some cases. But don't lose patience. Be on that, and then hopefully, once you start losing, you'll notice that, okay, this is a irreversible thing now. It's not that I'm going back to gaining weight. It is happening on a regular basis, and then you can sustain those practices. So that's all I can say. All right. So this is again not my experience, but experiences from patients, from people who have consulted with me, and based on and again, it's evidence-based studies as well.
Right. And like you take one, it's also depends upon your mental state of mind also. Stress has so much of an impact on your body. And the other thing, it was jokingly referred to as, one ice cream bar is about 350 calories. and you think, okay, it's just a small ice cream bar, I'll have it. But it takes about 1 hour on the treadmill to do that. So everything, the good bad habits are easy to practice, but when you come to the good living practices or good practices to incorporate that, it takes time.
Yeah,
and it takes patience.
Yes, absolutely. And Radhika, that example was really good that you mentioned, because I know a lot of people like to eat bananas, which is really good. I'm not saying no, because it has potassium, it has magnesium, it has calcium. It's very, very good food. But remember one thing, compared to other fruits, if you eat one banana, okay, then so which means you're gaining approximately 250 calories. Now, how much time does it take? It takes 25 minutes to burn that calories. So which means that when you eat a banana, make sure that you engage in a physical exercise or a physical practice that about 20 or 25 minutes, so that so basically what's happening is your input of calories is not exceeding the output. Okay, so which means that your output is also exceeding. So you're equally burning your calories. If it's only when you don't burn enough, that's when you start raising your what I call excess fat. Okay, so not to say no to bananas, but if you're eating your food that is caloric rich, make sure that you have at least 25-30 minutes on that, whether it's a walk, whether it's a treadmill, whether it's a gym, whether it is tennis, whether it is some kind of physical activity of 25 to 30 minutes, so that you are burning. So what happens is over time, you are burning whatever you're eating. So which means then the body does not have excess calories to build up. So once there's no excess calories to build up, there's no excess weight gain. So all this is intricately linked. So please be mindful of that as well.
Right. I think someone had raised their hand. I don't know the number, but
yeah, I think Radhika, that is me. Vaidehi. I just had a question for Ram, that what about smoothies? When you make smoothies, you're pulverizing all the ingredients. Now, does the pulverization by the blender, does that lose the nutrient values? And second thing is, so when you're eating, when you're consuming that, you're not chewing as much, so you're not producing a lot of saliva. So is the absorption of the same healthy smoothie is going to be not so efficient?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Vaidehi. So here, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to add one more element here. So for people who are into smoothies, okay, number one, make sure. So it's very interesting, because I don't know about some of you that who have a habit of eating smoothies, but a lot of people that have come to me for consultancy, when they eat smoothie, what happens is they mix 3 bananas, 3 apples, 3 oranges, several grapes and all that. So my question to them is, if you're eating in isolation, would you still really eat 1 banana or 3 bananas in a single sitting? No. They said, oh, it's a smoothie. Yeah, it's a smoothie, yes. But the problem is, it's a smoothie that contains abundance of calories through mixing of so many fruits. So don't do that. So number one, if it's a smoothie, make sure that it's just, think about how you'll be eating. If it is 1 apple or 1 banana, make a smoothie of 1 apple or 1 banana, but don't mix. Or if you're eating a mix of 1 banana, 1 apple, and maybe few grapes, just make a smoothie of that alone. Okay, so don't, just because it's smoothie, don't bring in too many things, too many veggies and too many fruits, and don't mix it. That's number one. Number two, don't add excess sugar. In fact, I would suggest that don't even add any extra sugar to your smoothie, because smoothie itself has enough sugar itself. Okay, you don't want to add excess sugar to that. That's number two. Number three, for people who are into liquid diets or into liquid smoothies or soups or something, one way to recapitulate the act of eating or the act of chewing is take a mouthful of the juice, the soup or the fluid or the smoothie, and see if you can move it around your mouth to generate some saliva, because that's what I do. For example, now when I'm eating chapati with a soup, okay, either it's a rasam or a sambar or just regular soup, what I do is I actually move the soup into my mouth for a few rounds. Okay, so then I'm generating enough saliva. So at least you're generating some saliva that will enter along with your soup into your body. Okay, so that's another practice that you can develop along with those when it comes to juicy or when it comes to liquid diets.
Yeah, but you didn't address the other one. So when you pulverize it, are you losing the nutritive value of the
No.
ingredients, even if you make a very healthy smoothie with no sugar and less fruit?
No, you're not. The elements are not getting. They're not getting lost anywhere. They are still there. Okay. Just pulverizing is nothing but a outside act of chewing. Okay, you're just making it more softer. You're making it more soupy like, but you're not losing anything in that process because you're going to incorporate that into your mouth. Okay, the only thing is whether your digestive system is sufficient enough to absorb those. Okay, you may be taking it, but if your digestive system is not capable of absorbing it, then you're just going to lose it as a fluid into the urine, into the kidneys and to the urine. Okay, so make sure that you do all the other things in order to absorb it and in order to digest it properly.
Yeah. Thanks, Ram.
Sure.
And you bring up a good point about the number of fruits and vegetables. Like, for example, if you drink a cup of orange juice, that a cup of orange juice has the juice of maybe 3 to 4 oranges at least.
Yeah.
But when you eat the orange by itself, you're eating only one orange, and that fills you up.
That's
that's
very important. Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Important. So especially with juice and with the smoothies and everything, you need to be cognizant of, even though it is only 1 cup that you're drinking, how much, what ingredients go into that is important.
Yes, absolutely.
The one last point is that, for older folks, they have this protein shakes and everything. So even that is so smooth. And so you have to do what you just suggested, is to roll inside the mouth so that you let it get absorbed properly.
Yeah, it may sound very trivial, but more and more people, at least in our clinic, we are seeing that a lot of people, because on one hand, they have less number of teeth, okay, and even if they have dentures, what happens is probably because of usually what happens is the minute you're older, generally, and if you're in a clinic, if you're in a senior care center, the thing is what they equate your adulthood is that your capacity to break down the food is very low. And so what happens is they tend to give, in the senior care centers, they tend to give you more of the liquid food, which is not, it's okay, but the thing is, in the long run, it's not good, especially for people who have early stages of dementia and people who have brain fog and all that. You don't want to end up your life just by taking fruit juices or liquid juices or soups and all that.
Right.
So and that's the reason why Ayurveda always insisted that there is a reason why we have 32 in our mouth, and it's not in the digestive system, it's not in the stomach, it's in the mouth. Okay, there is a reason why we have these things here, the teeth. Okay, so the more you crush, the more you grind, the more you do the entire action of breaking the food, the more you're strengthening your brain. So that's the reason why even in older adults who have less number of teeth or who have denture use, let's make it a habit, especially for our parents. If you have parents and if you notice that they are at the stage where they might be having some memory issues, make sure that they start chewing on some food. Okay, start on softer food and then slowly elevate that to a stage where they can start chewing on chapatis and breads and all that a little harder. Okay, so let them at least get that benefit of the brain mouth or the brain saliva interaction.
Right. So is chewing gum not a good idea?
No, it's not. All you're doing is generating saliva, but there's nothing beyond that. Okay. And number two, what happens is it's a residual, it's something which you cannot digest. So you have to ultimately throw it out. So what is it doing? It's only generating saliva. It's okay. Usually what happens is, it's very interesting because both functional medicine and Ayurveda, we always think about who are the people who are likely to chew gum. Chewing gum is it's a sense of security, and for people who have emotional issues, they are the ones who are likely to be chewing gum because it provides them that sense of security. So what it does, it doesn't do anything. All it does is generate saliva, but there's no food there because the gum itself is what we call non-digestive cellulose. Okay, it's non-digestible cellulose, so it doesn't do anything. It just generates saliva. So you don't want to do that on a regular basis because all it does is it's a sense of security, and you can build the sense of security through other means. There are so many other ways of building sense of security. not just by randomly chewing a gum.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our session, but are there any other questions?
So is chewing gum produces saliva? It is saliva is alkaline, right?
Yes.
So when you eat, say if you're kind of too far from food and you have to, you get acidity because your stomach doesn't have any food. So if you start chewing the gum, can this alkaline saliva pacify your stomach instead of producing the acidity?
It does, and but you don't have to chew a gum to do that. That's the reason why. So there are a couple of things that people in some of the texts that you'll see, they did that. You know what they said? They said, if you drink a little amount of warm water with the spices, you're actually generating more saliva. And then what you can do is that 15 minutes, remember I told you about keeping a gap of 15 minutes between the time of drinking water and food. That 15 minutes is the time when they say you are generating enough saliva. In fact, you can voluntarily generate more saliva by thinking about the food. Okay, then what happens is without having to use a gum as a security, you can actually generate more saliva. And that generation of saliva is very important. So for people who have acidic issues, think about food. Okay, that's the reason why, and it's so important. That's the reason why traditionally our people, they always said, look, once you prepare the food, you have to look at the food. Okay, before you eat, look at the food and imbibe the aromas. So what happens is when you imbibe the aromas, sense of smell, okay, sense of sight, you're eating, you're seeing the food. What happens is that generates the same neural circuits in the brain, and then your saliva starts producing. Okay, so natural way of, so try to produce saliva in a natural fashion. You don't have to chew on the gum to do that. Nothing, I'm not saying don't do it. Don't eat gum. All I'm saying is, because sometimes most of the gums that you have contains empty calories, and sometimes they also contain sugar, sucralose or non-sugar things. You don't want to indulge in all those. So try to generate saliva in a non-gummy fashion or without involving a gum, and that saliva is enough. Yes, it's very good to stimulate the digestive system.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Ram.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you again, Ram, for a wonderful session. And we will try and share some, the websites for good recipes. And oh, Bindu has one question. Bindu?
No, actually, I was just clapping my hands and thanking Dr. Ram for this session. So that's a clapping hand.
Oh, that's a clapping. Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, and definitely please email us if you have any questions or anything, or if you'd like any particular topics or anything to be covered, and we will be happy to incorporate that. We are working on, we have all the sessions planned up to December, and January onwards, we have, we're working on the plan for that. So if you have any things that you would like us to cover, please let us know. And
Radhika, can I add here one point that we discussed in the morning? So yes. since there are few people here, I would Radhika and I were discussing. So just like last month, we had 2 months back, Chandraji had come and talked about how he incorporated some of the practices and how he was able to overcome his blood sugar levels, elevated blood sugar levels. So Radhika and I would like to invite some of you or your friends or anybody who's involved, who's taken this GLP, the tools that we talked about, to a next stage or to a level where you are seeing some changes, beneficial changes, because your experience at this forum will be a much better way of explaining to people about how you overcome some of those issues that you're having. So that will benefit others as well, because Radhika and I can keep talking, but there's always this element of acceptance when it comes from people who have incorporated those principles and who have seen those benefits. So starting January onwards, we would like to invite, or we would like to talk or discuss, just the way we did with Chandraji, where people who are willing to come on forum and then talk about how they overcome some of their health issues, anything that involved the good living practices.
And we would like to do actually once every quarter, we would like to do that. So that's our plan. and also incorporate, just to let you know, incorporate some things which involve our youth.
Children.
So
Yes.
children. And so we want to, do that. So if you have any subjects or anything that you would like us to cover, please feel free to email us at email Ram, or email NBHC at contact us at northbaytemple.org, and we'll be happy to explore that option. So thank you again, Ram. Thank you very much for a wonderful.
Can I make one comment here?
Yes.
Dr. Ram will be speaking. I have I work with Singapore-based organization. They also have many attendees from India, and Dr. Ram will be speaking about brain and other things this coming Friday.
Very good.
Because of Singapore and India timing, that will start at 7:30 our time and will go till 9:30 p.m. So 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. this coming Friday. And I can send to you, Radhika, and you can send it to everybody else.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to attend. I
Definitely.
think that will be a very wonderful presentation, I'm sure, as always.
You can actually, send it to me, and I will post it on the Good Living Practices WhatsApp and other WhatsApp groups. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chandraji.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good talk. Thank you, Radhika. Bye.
Thank you. And yes, please, as always, please spread the word. We want everybody to, benefit from this. And also the sessions are available from 1 through 11.
Thank you.
Are available. So if you've missed anything, you can go back and look at it in the YouTube. And this session will also be uploaded soon. I said, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ram and Radhika.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.